All right. Hi, everyone.
Hi,
What show are we on?
the five, show number five.
Yeah, 005. Today's April 22nd, 2022.
Let me hear.
And you're listening to the Mechanic to Millionaire podcast season 2, show number 5. All right, let's dive in. Need to pull the book. Thought I was ready. Not. Go.
Never.
Okay, share my screen so we can see where we're at in the book. I liked the information on the last podcast, the last show. One thing I was thinking too this morning, I just want to share, being on a personal development journey, like it's just going to be something that you do, like you eat every day for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And through that process, like we're still growing, like I'm still growing. There's things that I'm learning and new disciplines, not new disciplines, just it's broadened my awareness on the disciplines that like I can do better on, and then I start doing better on them because of the awareness, how that's grown through the continual journey, like never reaching a finish line. And so if you just come into it at that with that perspective, instead of trying to like win a race in a sprint, like the tortoise and the hare and being the hare, and like, okay, I'm going to learn everything I need to learn this month, and I'm going to cram it all in. But coming at it like I'm just going to chip away at it every single day. I'm going to read something, and there might be an aha in there. There might not be, but I'm going to look for one. And if you're reading the right material, there could be very likely one every day or multiple ones every day. You shouldn't have a famine of those ahas, and so looking at it from that perspective, so that when 10 years goes by, you could look back and say, wow, I've really grown. I mean, even 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years, and just really recognize that incredible growth in that journey that's happened over that 10 years. And we're not the same person. So just from that perspective, then there's not any like beating ourselves up, because you don't beat yourself up because you eat every day. You don't beat yourself up because you brush your teeth every day. And you don't beat yourself up like, did I do my teeth perfectly today? We just don't do that. So if we look at personal development like that kind of perspective, and then setting goals along with that, so that we have a reason to push ourselves to, discipline ourselves and in a positive way, in a way that gives us more freedom. So you have anything you want to add to that? And I probably don't need to be looking at the book while we do that.
Just, yeah, I think for me, real growth started to happen when personal development became a part of who I am and a part of my lifestyle rather than boxes that I was checking off. Okay, I did that. Now what? Or I did that and it's still not working or whatever, but it actually becomes a part of me. So for me, it's like figuring out how to align it with what I want and what I really want. And then why, how do I, instead of making it come from outside of me, like this book said to do that, it's like, okay, here's the principle. How does that align with the core of who I am? How does that align with what I want out of my life or who I believe I am? When I get quiet and I get rid of all the noise and that feeling inside of me, how does that resonate and how can I make that facilitate what I want so that it comes from inside out? It for me has made a lot of difference. I'm not very good at just checking off boxes. I have to like internalize things in order for it to actually work for me and with people that I work with too. I'm seeing it as a kind of a trend. I think it's a true principle. Outside in doesn't work as well as inside out. So
Yeah, one of the things that's coming up too along those lines is, like, I'll use that as an example. There's other areas, but it's just one that I think most people are familiar with. I'm familiar with. And like, you could go to church every week your entire life, and you might really learn the history of the Bible and the stories and be able to recite them and recall them at any moment because you've heard them over and over. But there could be an unfortunate thing where we didn't really grow. Like, yeah, we can recite the stories and we're familiar with them, but it didn't change me as an individual. And so in that lifelong journey and that pursuit, it is important to set goals that push us to be more than we're currently being with our sloppy habits that we have and our unrefined, disciplined habits, and growing out of those, kind of like pulling the weeds out. And when you pull the weeds out, you replace it with, a flower or something else that's going to be a better behavior, so that we reach that goal. That, so again, I think that's an important part of it too, is not just showing up, but really showing up. And that's an internal thing. It's an individual thing. It doesn't look for accolades. That's a personal quest for self-actualization, and starting to understand that process, the protocols in that. And that's not an individual thing. We need mentors. We need people that can share with us their knowledge to help us do that. But when we start applying it, yeah, there'll be some things that people will see, but they're not going to see the bigger part and the bigger piece of it, that growth that takes place. And that's the creative process in the individual. How's that? That came full circle. That's the book we're reading, right? The creative process in the individual. Okay, so let's jump into it. Let's see, share my screen. Okay. So we finished the forward. 5 shows in and we did it.
It's like to be celebrated.
All right. We did it. All right. So let's see what he says here. A little quote from Walt Whitman. I say, no man has ever yet been half devout enough. None has ever yet adored or worshipped half enough. None has begun to think how divine he himself is and how certain the future is. I say that the real and permanent grandeur of these states must be their religion. Otherwise, there is no real and permanent grandeur. Walt Whitman. And yeah, there was something that was coming up for me that he says throughout the book as I've been listening on the audio, and I just lost it. But that creative process that's within us, and it was along the lines of, like, why don't we give that the priority? Why are we so distracted by the small things and really losing the bigger things that we could enjoy, and that life and purpose of life was created for us to really enjoy? Like it's saying here, no one's ever been devout enough. Nobody's ever, it was along the lines of, so it was, he talks about the pillars on the temple, Boaz and Jachin. He pronounces it Jachin as Jachin. I think that's what it is. And those two represent the creative process in the individual, and then God's universe and how it is been created to support our creativity. But their two work together, and they have to be in harmony in order to work together. And he also said, like, I think he says, and we'll come across it eventually, maybe in a couple of years in the book, but he says in the Bible, it says to, I think it says to, what does it say? To know thyself, or to know, I think it says to know God. And then on the temple of Delphi, I think is what he says. He says on that temple, it says to know yourself. I might have it backwards, but either way, it's what we put in the workbook that we made during the first podcast for the workshops. Was the more you come to know God, the more you come to know yourself. The more you come to know yourself, and you start to see that you could design your life by design in the way that you want to intentionally, like literally create that life. And then you start to see the power that's within ourselves. And so we get to know who God is by getting to know who we are. And unless we put forth the time, energy, and effort and focus and priority that takes, somebody will never come to understand it. And even with all of that we could put into it, we'll never understand it in its fullest capacity. It's like we're still babes, and even though we live our life by design, it's a fairy tale dream come true life, we still are just beginning. And there's like, I haven't put as much as I could put into it, and I'm gentle on myself. I don't beat myself up about that, but I know I could do better than I do. So I like that, because it starts to help us to at least get some insight or some thinking processes around I'm going to take 100% responsibility that all of the greatness and possibility that there ever was is within me. It's in other people too. Like I'm not egotistical, like I'm the only one, but it's within me. And I'm not going to negate that. And this helps us to start to realize there's some work behind that. It should be a priority. There should be some, devout faith. And like he says, it's our religion, it's our philosophy and religion are the same. So anyways, there's a lot there I could just keep rambling on about. It's not really rambling, but, trying to get to that point that, oh, there it is. And that was profound. And it just changed everybody's life. I don't think I'll get there with this, but we'll get there throughout the book as we mastermind. But any thoughts you have on that?
When I'm in my right mind, meaning my real brain, instead of listening to, the negative Nancy that lives in there, that idea of as much as I think that I've worshiped, or as much as I think that I've come to understand the potential that lies within me and every human being a God in embryo, I still haven't even half arrived there. That to me is the most exciting concept in my whole life. Like it makes me so excited to know that I'm just brushing the surface with things that I'm learning. I heard someone say a few months ago, and I loved it. It was like, let's see, it was just that I can't direct quote it, so I'm not even going to try. But it was basically the idea that my mind will never be like God's mind. And as much as I try, I'll never get there because my brain is a human brain and his is God's brain. And that's how I want it to be. Like, I don't want to think that what I have now is all there is, or that any human form is, as all that's available. The fact that if I'm going to follow someone, and if I'm my whole life purpose is to become like someone, I want to be able to become like someone. I don't want to already be there. So the fact that my mind is not God's mind, and that I haven't even come to understand that the potential and grandeur, is that what the words were on that quote? I don't have mine pulled up, but I haven't even half begun to understand the grandeur that's available in real and permanent grandeur. Real and permanent, that's what is. And I haven't even begun to understand that yet. To me, that is the most exciting thing ever. It's like what keeps me going all the time. So when I get in that funky negative Nancy brain, I have found like triggers, like the sun, for example, is a trigger for me to switch my brain and to remember that there's way more than this. And that puts me back to excited and looking at my limitations, not as a problem really, or as a making me less than, or that I suck, but looking at my limitations as exciting, because I still have a long way to go of growth and development and progression and exploration and discovery. And it's just really cool to me. So.
And in beginning to understand this too, and really embrace this, helps us to see, like, yeah, our own self-actualization and the possibility there, but it also helps us to see others, and in a truth-based way, reverencing others and who they are and the potential that's in them as well. And a lot of times it's easy for people to see that in other people, but not in themselves. And, that's, where some work may need to be done, is recognizing and taking ownership of that and embracing it in its right, balanced way. Not better than anybody. Everybody's on a journey, and it's just all incremental. And I like what you're saying about embracing the fallibility of the finite mind. That's part of the pursuit, like to know hot and cold and good and bad and sick and health and intelligent and not so intelligent at times. It gives us that onward impetus to want to move forward. At least it's there. It's there for us if we choose to want that. And that's because of the nature of where we're at right now. Yeah, it is a cool process.
What Jim Coover said, and I think we mentioned this on the other podcast at one point, but he said, I my goals are the sun. Like I always make my goals the sun because I know I'm never going to get there. And that's the same kind of a feeling that comes with that quote. So, yeah.
Yeah. Bob Proctor says, don't make your goals so low that you hit them like easily,
Yeah.
without stretching yourself. And I like what Robert Kiyosaki says too. Like when you want something but you don't have enough money, don't lower your dreams, raise your standards, create more income if that's what it's going to take to have the thing that you want. Don't lower ourselves, when we have these higher desires within us. That's divine. Those higher desires that are within us are divine. And there is a way to bring them into existence by law, just like the farmer planting the seed and knowing what the crop is going to yield by planting the right seed. We can do that. This is something that I've been on, like this has been in my own internalizing process, and I'm glad to see that it's right here because order is heaven's first law. There was, he'll talk about it in here, but I think it's cool to bring it up, in this mastermind part. Like he talks about the immutable laws, like there's order, and we can come to have faith in that order. We do, like with the law of gravity. We have faith with the law of gravity. We understand flotation in boats. Like we can get into a boat knowing that it's not going to sink. We can get into an airplane knowing that all of a sudden flight is not going to change its mind. Like the principles of aeronautics is not going to change its mind, and then we go crashing down. And he uses a really cool, at first, when I listened to this, read this before in the past, it didn't hit me as much as it has now, but he talks about like if you want to make a box and you're going to cut the wood, if things were variable, like if there was variableness in the immutable laws, in the principles like gravity and math, he said you would cut a board to the length that you needed it to create the box. And then because of the chaos and the lack of order and the variableness in the law and in math, that board could all of a sudden change its width. Like it could change its size. It doesn't have to be what you measured out because that's not orderly and immutable. And so you could never build the box because it can change on you in any moment, and you go to line up and nail the boards together and they're not the length that you had cut them to originally. And that's disorderly. That's fallible. But there is no fallible or variableness in the law. In I call it the cousins or the relatives of the laws in how we decide to apply the laws. There is variableness in that, in how we want to apply them in order to reach certain goals that we have, but the main principles never change. And so some of the practical applications of the principles, those vary in how we enact them. I don't want to get into like a good example of that right now because it'll get me off the main point here. So orderly, this is a trigger for me that's come up just recently. And I really do like doing the listening and affirmations while I'm riding the bike. There must be something to that because it seems to be adding more quicker.
More not inspiring. So it's making it stronger. Like that's just the way it works.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I know Einstein rode a bike, like he'd ride it on the campus while he was thinking. There's actually pictures of him doing that. So ordering, like getting into order, like I shared, I think in the first podcast in the introduction, like some helps and triggers for doing the affirmations. Like I give excellence and quality to the highest, grandest version in every thought and every feeling. But orderly needs to be in there too. Like we need to order rightly our thoughts and our feelings. And that's hitting me in a way that like, because I have the rubber band on, so if I start thinking something that is not the highest, grandest version, then I just like catch myself, let myself know consciously that I caught myself, and then switch back to thinking the highest, grandest version. There's also an orderly process to that. And like the things that are on my vision right now, the goals that I have, there's a few, like there's 2 or 3, and I've got to keep them orderly in a fashion so that it produces the result that I'm wanting. And so again, order, the box And I think this is the main point that I'm just now remembering that I wanted to make was the box and the law is like immutable. It stays in order. Like it is orderly. When you cut the box and you measure it out based on the principles of measurement, and then you can create the box and fasten the box. It maintains its order. And that's what I want to do with my thoughts. I want to maintain my order of my thoughts once I have what those thoughts are and what my goals are and everything's in harmony and I have the right thinking and feeling that harmonizes with the goal that will manifest it. Once I do that, I want to be immutable with that thing. It doesn't turn me into a robot. It just helps me to reach the goal faster, more efficiently, and effectively by keeping an orderly method and process of my thoughts. Does that make sense? So like the box and the laws, they can be orderly and immutable. So can my thoughts and feelings. There's going to be life and there's going to be variableness, and feeling sorrow isn't wrong. Feeling upset and maybe discouraged at times, that's not wrong. However, if it throws me off of my order and makes it more chaotic and out of my control, then that's going to inhibit and negate me getting to the goal that I want faster. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does. And it goes along with what at the end of the last show, I said there was something I wanted to talk about, but I wanted to bring it up this time because of time. It goes right along with that. And I'll start by saying, if you can let me share my screen, I have
Yeah.
some.
Can you, or do I need to make you a co-host?
Make me a co-host.
Okay.
If we're getting thrown off, like you're saying, like feeling sad, feeling mad, feeling, all emotions are good. Like they're given to us for a reason. They help us to know. Well, they connect us. They also help us to know when we're on the right track or not, like where we're deviating to the left or the right, right? And if those emotions that are taking us off the course of our goals or our grandest version of ourselves, that's a sign that it's a core belief, that it's attached to a core belief that was wired into us early on. And that takes work to work through. So ignoring that, that's where the law of non-resistance comes in so powerfully. If you can really understand what that means, if I have something that's thrown me off course, it's a sign that I actually need to take a look at it and figure out what is it that's going on, because rewiring a core belief takes work and it takes effort. And it takes a little bit of awareness, or a lot of awareness, of what's going on. So non-resistance is like resisting something and like ignoring it and trying to bring yourself back on course when there's chaos here. That chaos is going to get bigger and louder and it's going to explode and knock you way off course, right? So it's really important to be aware of, yeah, normal fluctuation of emotions is healthy and good, but if it's throwing me so off course that it starts to just overpower me, that's a sign that there's something to work on. So let me just show you this graph. I was listening to Working with the Law by Raymond Hollywell as I do a group therapy session twice a week at an addiction treatment center, and they want me to teach from Working with the Law along with therapeutic stuff, which is super cool to me because it's like two of my lives coming together. It's also faith-based, Christian faith-based. So it's like all of my heart is like there. It's really fun. But he was talking about, if we have a desire, it's really important for us to have an expectation. Like a desire has to have somewhere to go. So we have to not only desire something, but we have to expect that it's going to happen. The word expectation gets really confusing because expectations can lead us off course. And the guys were having a really hard time, like, but expectations are bad. And I'm like, no, expectation in and of itself is necessary in order for us to have what we desire. And if our focus, this is assuming the wish fulfilled, we desire something, those desires that are deep within us are given to us by God. They're what guide us and let us to know the path to take and what it is that we're going for. So any desire, a desire for connection, a desire for intimacy, a desire for happiness, peace. There's, lots of desires that we could name. If I have that desire, if I'm going to actually achieve that. I have to believe that I can. So I have to expect that if God's going to give me the desire, he's also going to give me a way to have it. So that's where, that's a big like fire hose of power that leads me from desire to actually receiving my expectation. What happens a lot of the time is we have this desire and we start off with this focus, and then we get derailed by circumstances, and we start to believe that in order for me to have my desire, my circumstances need to be a certain way. If I'm going to feel happy and peaceful, then I need to have $1 million in the bank, and I need to be able to have, really good relationships. I never fight, everybody loves me. I need to have acceptance. All of these things. And so in order for me to have what I want, I'm giving my expectation to circumstances. That's when expectations take us off course. Or if I'm giving it other people's expectations, like I want to be a scientist and my dad wants me to be a professional basketball player. So I don't know why I have an extra A there. It's supposed to be an S, I guess. There's expectation now. And so if I'm putting my focus on, I have to be a good basketball player in order to get my dad's approval, then I'm not going to get the satisfaction of becoming the scientist, but I'm also not going to ever feel like needing somebody's approval. Really comes back to a core belief that I don't matter to people, and I'm going to do everything I can to matter. And then I don't belong with other people. So the desire is love and belonging and mattering. And I'm giving that expectation to, if I become a professional basketball player, my dad will like me, type of it. Does that make sense? So that focus of where my desire is going to come from takes me off course. Or the means to the goal. This is one that I have experienced. There was a time when I was doing 100-day challenges all the time, and every day I would get on Facebook and I would do a video about that day in the challenge, and I loved it and it really worked for me. And there was a point where I was I wasn't feeling the way that I wanted to feel. And I was talking to my coach and he was like, so why do you do this on social media? Like, what's your goal? And he said, take a break from it just for 1 week. Like, make your challenge be that I'm going to take a break from social media for a week and doing these videos. And I started to realize that instead of, most of the time when I did the videos, I kept my expectation on the fact that if I'm doing 100 days of courage, that I'm going to be more courageous at the end. But there was a time that it was like, nobody's watching my videos. I'm not getting a whole lot of views and likes. And so the means to the goal, the videos I was doing every day, became where my focus went. And it became where I was starting to put my expectation. I'm going to get my courage from other people watching my video. And it was throwing me off course, and it wasn't giving me what I wanted to feel. So that taking a break helped me realize, oh yeah, my focus is courage. It isn't on, views. I don't care if anybody watches. This is just a means to my goal. So it was leading me off. And when we're doing that, we only have a trickle left of force that actually is going to get us what we expect. So you see how that focus goes clear down to a trickle when I'm letting it be derailed by all of these other things. So anyway, that's where our feelings can come in, because if I desire a feeling and I have an expectation, the way to actually get that is to let myself feel it the whole way through. And it gets bigger and bigger, and it's easier to access the more that I go, because I have that expectation. But if I have the expectation to feel happy and I put my focus on feeling happy, I'm going to find happiness along the way. And that's going to end up being not only my desire and my expectation, but it's also going to be the signal that I'm on the right track. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is really good. Keep that up for just a second.
Okay.
So the distractions, your destiny is not written. It's very rare. You have to find and discover your destiny. And that happens through the unfoldment of who you are and living up to those desires that we have. And then we fulfill that desire, and then it moves on to another desire, and we fulfill that desire. And our destiny is not a certain thing that you're going to accomplish, like one certain act or one certain impact that it makes. It's an unfoldment of who we are. And the distractions keep people from discovering that. And so they never fulfill their destiny. Like, I don't want people to think a destiny is something that God wants you to do, that is like you have to do it and he spelled it out for you and you're doing it because he wants you to do it or God wants you to do it. So it's an actual unfoldment of self-actualization, self-realization, actualization is how we find that destiny, because as we're true to our own desires, we grow, become more aware, and we're able to be more so that we can do more. And in that, there's a feeling of, this is what I was born to do. These other sidetrack things, those are not what you were born to do. But so many people get caught up in those sidetrack things, and they don't even not only have a little trickle, there's like a block. It's like a dam that doesn't even let them, discover who they are and who they could be. And
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at
cool.
Moses, I think everybody at least knows who Moses is and heard of the Red Sea. Moses's focus was on freeing Israel, and Israel's focus on was being freed, but they were putting their trust in Pharaoh. And then, when they came against that block, that barrier of the Red Sea, they lost their belief at all. They're like, see, because they were putting their expectation in the person or in the circumstances of the situation. But Moses, with his focus still being on freeing Israel and knowing where that expectation came from, like the source of that, he just continued to keep that focus and had the inspiration to part the Red Sea, and they went through. So even the barriers that we feel are there, like there's no way that I'm going to ever, be financially free, for one thing. Because look at all of the debt that I have. Look at how I never went to school and I only make this much an hour. And look at all how inflation is coming and gas prices are now out of control. There's no way I'll ever be financially free because there's this huge Red Sea in my way. When you know what it is that you want from being financially free, is that just that sense of freedom? Is that peace? Is it, what is the desire that you really have? Financially free is just a means to the goal, or it's a circumstance, right? But you can part that Red Sea if you keep your focus on the feeling of what it is that you desire and not put your trust in other things.
Yeah, it's an unfoldment.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. I want to share something here. You can see my screen now, right?
Yeah.
So just finishing up, we're at 32 minutes now. So just quickly, order is heaven's first law. And this is how it works, you guys. This is how the podcast is. We just see like these little order is heaven's first law, and then we go off on, let's talk about that and what we've learned personally and what's the practical application of that, and how can that be passed on so that somebody else could speed up their progress because of what we've learned. So that's just the way we operate. And so I want to just finish up with this thought here. It goes right along with what you were saying. So order is heaven's first law. So the opposite of that would be unorderly thoughts. And the way that I've heard Bob Proctor express that, he says, people think they're thinking, but they're not. Their minds are just busy. And busy thoughts mostly are created by external factors and circumstances, like what you just showed. And what happens is we start to believe, it starts to frame up a belief in us, those external factors, whatever they are. There's like an infinite amount of ways that external factors could show up, but we start to believe in those rather than what we started off in the beginning. The challenges start to frame up our belief, and we start to doubt our faith, right?
They frame up our belief, or they confirm the beliefs that we formed before we could even talk. Like, we start forming them early, and then they just continue to compound them and make them stronger.
And the thing that gets rid of that is seeing the truth and learning the truth and shining it on that erroneous darkness. And that's what, again, this podcast is all about, is like, let's see the truth of the principles. Principle trumps precedence, or however it said that in the beginning of the book. So when we learn the principles, we can take that old stuff that we were governing our lives by, and now we have a new light shined on it, and we start to behave different because we see different. And that's what we want for everybody. We recognize in our own lives that process has allowed us to live a very joyful, purposeful life in an orderly way. So again, getting those thoughts it is challenging. And Bob Proctor said in an audience one time, a guy in something like in reference to what we're talking about, he said, the participant said, well, that sounds hard. And he says, well, it is hard, but you don't have to do it. You can choose to do it if you want to. And I like the phrase, choose your hard, you know?
Yeah, because where you are is also probably hard because that's why you're here. You're
Yeah.
looking better.
One other thing too, real quick, I know we're over, but that sad and the sorrow and the scourge that we talk about, even when our thoughts are orderly, there could still be something happening, like a loved one gets sick or they get hurt, or maybe you have a pet that's suffering, or, it's not bad to feel those feelings. It's when it throws us off of the order. And that's not throwing us off the order. Like, that's part of life. That's allows us to see and feel and have emotions and both sides of those emotions. And we're always going to have the opportunity to feel those. Something's always going to come up. But when it throws us off, like going back to Carrie's graph, if there's something that comes off that goes out to the side and it throws us off of our orderly thoughts, that's when, we need to snap the rubber band on our wrist. And the only reason you would snap that rubber band on your wrist is because you know the principles. If you don't know them, you wouldn't even have a rubber band on your wrist to try and keep your thoughts orderly. So good stuff that came out today. Any last things you want to share before we jump off?
Not anything that won't take us down another
I know, right? Another 5 minutes.
rabbit hole brain. So sorry about that. It's a can of worms. But yeah, it's exciting. This stuff makes me excited. So I'm happy that we're back.
I know. Me too.
In a live version. Yeah. So thanks for joining us.
See you guys. Have a great day.
Bye.